Good evening, all. Welcome to Narayana Educational Institutions discussion of the JEE Mains September 2nd session, first session paper. Okay. Now, one disclaimer before we start off with this particular discussion over here. The disclaimer is this: these questions are purely based on the student's memory. We are going to be having errors in the questions. We are also going to be having errors in the way the question has been framed. We will also be seeing some errors in the key which has been presented in some cases. Now, I will try to make sure wherever I see some kind of an error, I will try to mention it as much as my knowledge basically pertains over here. At the same time, take the discussion with a little bit of grain of a salt, so to say. At the same time, make sure that you are paying attention to the format of the questions and how the questions are being presented in terms of where the questions show up from. Mainly because the paper discussion here will benefit you tremendously if you end up understanding how the next few papers are going to be coming out. That is the purpose of having this paper discussion. My name is Prashant and I'll be presenting the chemistry paper discussion for this particular first session, September 2nd paper. Let's start off. The first question here is this: which metal is used in devising photochemical cell? So when you're talking about photochemical cell here, any photochemical cell, the principle to be used over here is ionization energy should be low, right? So we should be having low value of ionization energy for this kind of a photochemical cell over here. So when we talk about low value of ionization energy, what does that actually mean? It means that among the following, they are asking you to find which has the lowest IE value. All of them here are present in group 1. So they are all present in group 1 over here. So what are the elements in group 1? Let me list them down. We have it as lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium and cesium. So among these elements over here, when you're going down the group over here, ionization energy will be decreasing over here. Down the group, IE value ends up decreasing. So basically that tells us that cesium is going to be having the lowest ionization energy in this particular case here. In reality, what happens over here is we will have all three of these guys. Potassium, rubidium and cesium, all of them are capable of being used in photochemical cells. But we will mainly end up using only potassium and cesium usually. Why do we use them? Potassium we use mainly because it is cheaper. Cesium is the best though. Among these options given here, you are expected to choose the best option applicable here, which is the lowest IE. Lowest ionization energy is going to be applicable for cesium in this particular case. So cesium is the one which is going to be chosen for this particular photochemical cell over here. Alright, let's get to the next one. Next question here is this: for following cell reaction, copper solid plus tin 2 plus aqueous giving copper 2 plus aqueous plus tin solid. What is going to be given here? They are giving us copper 2 plus and tin 2 plus concentrations are 1 molar respectively in this case. Find the Gibbs energy change in kilojoule units is what is asked over here. They are giving you E naught of copper 2 plus to copper is going to be 0.34, E naught of tin 2 plus to tin is going to be minus 0.16. Let's have a look now. So in this case, what is the reaction which is happening here? What is the change which is happening? Let me write this in the cell notation first. So copper is undergoing oxidation to become copper plus 2 and we'll end up having tin plus 2 undergoing reduction to become tin. So copper gives copper 2 plus over here. Now copper 2 plus to copper is given as 0.34, meaning copper becoming copper 2 plus is actually going to be minus 0.34 volts over here. Tin 2 plus becoming tin has been given over here as minus 0.16. So this works out as minus 0.16 over here. So we're going to be having minus 0.34 and minus 0.16. So the E naught of this cell works out as minus 0.34 minus 0.16, which of course works out as minus 0.50 volts in this particular case here. So we're going to be having the electrode potential of this cell being minus 0.50 volts in this scenario over here. They are asking us to find out what is going to be the Gibbs free energy change over here. Now in this reaction which has been given, we are going to be having 2 electrons being transferred over here. Because there are 2 electrons being transferred, the N value for this is basically going to work out as 2. So let me write down the delta G naught here. Delta G naught works out as minus N into F into E naught of the cell. Alright, so minus NF into E naught of the cell is going to be the delta G naught for this reaction. So delta G naught is going to be minus NF E naught. Now we can directly substitute here. Minus 2 into 96,500 into E naught of the cell, which works out as minus 0.50. Meaning now we'll end up having this minus and minus getting cancelled off. So it works out as 2 into 0.5, which works out as 1 into 96,500. In this case, the units which you are going to be getting are basically going to be joules. So the answer we are getting is currently 96,500 joules. They want you to give the answer in kilojoule units over here, which means this is going to work out as 96.5 kilojoules in this particular case over here. This is the answer for this particular question. Let's get to the next one. Okay, this is going to be a typical Markovnikov addition of water. All right, we are going to be having Markovnikov addition of water happening in this particular case over here, but with a ring expansion. All right, we are going to be having a ring expansion happening in this case. It is a typical Markovnikov addition of water example in this case. Let's start off. So what's going to be happening is like this. We have this compound, we are given that we are going to be reacting it with H plus slash H2O. H3O plus is actually nothing but H plus slash H2O. Both mean the same thing. Okay, now let's go over here. What is going to be happening? H plus being the electrophile will come and attack this carbon. When it attacks that carbon, we'll have this pi cloud shifting onto that carbon here. Why will it attack this carbon? Because carbocation is more stable on this particular carbon. C plus is more stable over here, because of which the H plus ends up attacking over here. When this happens, this pi cloud shifts over here. It will result in the formation of this particular carbocation over here. Alright, it will result in the formation of this carbocation in this particular case. In this case here, this carbocation which is formed here will now undergo a rearrangement which is going to be resulting in a ring expansion which happens over here. Now what kind of rearrangement is going to be happening here? We have this bond breaking off. Alright, this bond breaks off and we'll have the pair of electrons here being taken over by this carbon. Then this carbon will go and attack this carbon over here to complete the ring in this particular scenario over here. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, why am I numbering? The reason why I'm numbering over here is because whenever you see any of these kind of ring expansion or ring contraction type of cases, it is always best to number them. Now, why do I suggest numbering? Very simple. It reduces the probability of making error. Ultimately, in these kind of competitive exams, what matters more is making sure your answer is perfectly correct. If you end up rushing stupidly and making a mistake in the question, that will cost you tremendously. You have to avoid that as much as possible. So in this particular case here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going to number this as 6, 7 and 8. So what's happening here? Carbon 1, carbon 5 bond has broken. Carbon 5 and carbon 6 now form a new bond over here. This basically results in something like this. So we end up having carbon 1, carbon 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 and 6 have formed a bond right now. And 6 carbon is going to be attached to a 7th carbon also. And carbon 1 is attached to carbon number 8 as well. And which carbon has got the positive charge now? This carbon 1 and carbon 5 bond broke and carbon 5 took the electrons, correct? So carbon 5 is not going to be having a positive charge. Carbon 1 lost the electrons. So carbon 1 ends up with a positive charge over here. So what happens in the next step is water molecule will now act as a nucleophile and will come and attack carbon number 1. When it attacks carbon 1, what will we be getting over here? We will be getting carbon 1 attached to an OH2 plus 1 and a carbon over here. Next step, the H plus will be kicked out over here, resulting in the formation of the product over here like this. This product over here is going to be option 3 in this particular case here. So the answer for this question here is going to be option 3 in this scenario over here. Let's get to the next one. Okay. The correct structure of Dettol. Dettol is a very common household item which all of you guys should be familiar with, at least during these COVID times. Alright, make sure you are sanitizing your surroundings as much as you can, and when you go back home, wash a little bit with Dettol, at least the clothes. Alright, now let's get back to things. What is Dettol made up of? This Dettol here is made up of 2 main compounds. One is going to be parachloroxylenol. It's actually parachlorometaxylenol if you want to give it as a full name over there. Another one is going to be alpha terpenol. So these are the 2 main compounds which are going to be part of Dettol. This information is available in chemistry in everyday life. Alright, this is available in chemistry in everyday life chapter from NCERT class 12. Alright, it is available in chemistry in everyday life topic from NCERT class 12 topic over there. It is the last topic in that particular textbook. Now, this is available and the structure is also given. This is a pure fact-based question. I have to inform you guys about this, that the JEE mains which is conducted by NTA will have quite a few of these fact-based questions. You are certainly expected to know some structures which are available in chapters like chemistry in everyday life, biomolecules, polymers, definitely. And you need to know what groups are present, and at least the bare minimum you need is to be able to recognize the structure certainly. Okay, so in this case, you're going to be having it as para-chloro-metaxylenol. Para here, what is the para indication? You're going to be having these two guys in para configuration. The meta part over here, what does it indicate? The methyl groups are going to be meta with respect to the OH. So answer here is option 3 basically. Alright, so this is going to be your answer for para-chloro-metaxylenol. The best way is read NCERT. Let's get to the next one. Which of the following statements about ozone is incorrect? So they're asking us some information about ozone. They're asking us which among the following statements is incorrect. Ozone acts as a protective layer against ultraviolet rays. This is obviously well known by everybody. This is true. It is a toxic layer and converts NO to NO2. Correct. Ozone is going to be toxic mainly because O3 is a powerful oxidizing agent. Alright, it is a powerful oxidizing agent. So definitely the ozone gas, if it is present on the surface, is toxic to all living creatures. It is going to be extremely toxic in terms that it is a powerful oxidizing agent. It can even destroy NO and convert it to NO2. Let's get to the next point. It converts chlorine free radical of CFCs to chlorine dioxide. So it converts chlorine free radical of CFCs to chlorine dioxide over here. What does that tell us? It tells us this. Chlorine free radical. Now, what is this chlorine free radical? How is it generated? Chlorofluorocarbons. What are these guys? Chlorofluorocarbons are basically going to be compounds like this, like say CF2Cl2. Chlorofluorocarbons used to be used as refrigerants in refrigerators. Refrigerant now, for instance, nowadays if you take a refrigerator, there is going to be a gas which passes on the inside over there, correct? When you open the refrigerator, you can see some gas which is flowing slightly. That is basically going to be your refrigerant over there. The basic property required for a refrigerant is it needs to be volatile at a particular temperature, and it should be completely non-toxic. CFCs used to be used as refrigerants earlier. Nowadays, we don't use them. We use different types of aerosols as refrigerants. Now, what is the problem with CFC here? CFCs, when they reach the upper atmosphere, what happens is the ions, or rather the ionosphere over there will end up having ultraviolet rays definitely. The ultraviolet rays are capable of breaking this molecule into chlorine atoms over here. So the chlorine atoms or nascent chlorine which is produced over here, this is a terribly reactive substance which can destroy the ozone layer. How does it destroy the ozone layer? Ozone is going to be having an equilibrium established with oxygen gas in the upper atmosphere in the ionosphere layer. This equilibrium is going to be continuously maintaining our ozone blanket which is going to be at the top layer over there. Now, what does this chlorine atom do? The chlorine atom goes and destroys that equilibrium. How will it destroy the equilibrium here? It goes and reacts with ozone to first end up forming chlorine monoxide free radical and oxygen gas. This chlorine monoxide free radical which is going to be formed over here is going to be something which is going to be causing major trouble. Why does it cause major trouble? The major trouble reason is because of this. Ozone, when it is reacting and it is going to be in equilibrium with oxygen, one of the steps of the equilibrium is ozone gives O2 plus nascent oxygen. That nascent oxygen will then end up going and reacting with more ozone to generate, 2 more O2 over here. This is the equilibrium which is going to be maintained in the upper atmosphere over there. So, how does this equilibrium get destroyed over here? This equilibrium gets destroyed when the ClO dot is going to be present. This ClO dot, which is chlorine monoxide free radical, will react with this nascent oxygen part over here and will end up giving me chlorine free radical yet again and oxygen gas. So what is my chlorine free radical doing? The chlorine free radical is only consuming ozone and the reactant over here. Alright, so the chlorine free radical is basically going to be destroying the ozone, but it does not react with oxygen gas. That means it is only reacting with the reactant of this guy, but is not really consuming the product over there. At the same time, it is also consuming the product of this reaction, thereby forcing this to happen more and more in the forward direction effectively. This basically ends up consuming the ozone layer tremendously over here. But this part over here where it gives chlorine dioxide, that part is wrong. So in this case, third option is going to be definitely wrong in this particular scenario here. Second option is correct over here. But they are asking us which among the following options is incorrect. Incorrect na, we are basically not looking at the correct option there. We are basically looking for the incorrect option there. So in this scenario here, we will end up having the third option being incorrect over here. So if the third option is incorrect, we will definitely end up having the answer for this case as the third option over here. Let me just check up for the fourth option as well. So this is going to be correct, correct. So wrong and wrong. This is incorrect. So we'll end up having this as the current answer here. It acts as a shield to our atmosphere. This statement is correct, meaning it is not our answer for this question. So the answer for this question works out as option 3 in this particular case over here. Let me get to the next one. Okay, the correct IUPAC name, the following compound is going to be. This compound has multiple groups present over here. Okay, these are the 3 groups which are present in the molecule here, which can influence the name of the compound in this particular case here. Now, among these 3 here, the carboxylic acid is going to be having the highest priority and is the highest priority functional group here. So this has to be given the lowest possible numbering of 1. Then we need to choose the longest chain possible. So longest chain possible is this guy over here. So we'll be choosing that 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So we end up having a 6 carbon long chain where this is a substituent and this methyl is also going to be a substituent. So these 2 guys are going to be substituents in this particular case. So I'm going to be having this particular case here. What is going to be the scenario here? It's a 6 carbon long chain. So it's going to be hex. Third carbon has got a double bond. So it's hex 3-ene oic acid. Okay, and I'm going to be having the second carbon having a methyl, the fifth carbon has a formyl. So it will be 5 formyl, 2 methyl, hex 3-ene oic acid, which is not this, 5 formyl, 2 methyl, hex 3-ene oic acid. There's a problem here, it's given as conic. Obviously, it is supposed to have been ene oic, alright. So it's supposed to have been ene oic. So it's supposed to have been En over here, not C over here. My guess is the student who gave this question probably has a handwriting similar to mine. So the person who typed it out probably assumed it is not En but is Cn. So tiny errors will happen. This is also wrong. So answer for this question is option 2. Let's get to the next one. If a compound AB4 is polar covalent, then its possible geometry. Now this is a fairly vague term. It is not probably going to be correct over here. Most probably they would have simply mentioned is a polar compound. Now what does polar compound actually mean? Polar compound na dipole moment is not equal to 0. That is basically what it means. So my expectation is there is a tiny error in the question. It is probably supposed to be polar compound, not polar covalent. Polar covalent doesn't make much sense, at least in this context over here. Polar compound, yeah. Polar compound na dipole moment is non-zero. Let us start off here. Square planar. Square planar na you will end up having it like this. AB4 with 2 lone pairs applicable. This is the only way for this kind of a compound to be square planar. This will end up having dipole moment as 0, meaning this is not the answer. Tetrahedral. Tetrahedral na it will work like this. Okay, in this case here, of course, dipole moment is going to be 0, not the answer. Seesaw shape. Seesaw shape works like this. In this seesaw shape structure here, just like the first one, you will have a lone pair applicable over here at this location. When you have a lone pair like this at this location, what happens in this case is, this seesaw shape structure over here will definitely end up having a dipole moment because you will not have the lone pair part over here getting cancelled by this part. These two are not going to be equal. Let me call this as X, let me call this as Y. X is not going to be equal to Y in this case. Dipole moment will not be equal to 0 in this case. Square pyramidal के लिए we need 5 bond pairs. Here we have only 4 bond pairs in this AB4 type. So if you want it to be square pyramidal, it has to be AB5 type, like this. This will be possible for square pyramidal. AB4 square pyramidal is not possible. So the best answer for this, or the correct answer for this, is going to be seesaw shape structure over here. In this case, it is not supposed to be seesaw like this. It is supposed to be seesaw. SEE is what I remember the spelling as, but chalo, it's okay. Now, next one. So answer for this is going to be option 3 in this particular case here. Next, 3 moles of oxygen and 5 moles of argon are present in a closed container. Find the sum of their internal energies in terms of RT. Now, my personal belief here is there is probably going to be a tiny change in the question here, because we can't really calculate internal energy for any particular gas or any system directly, because internal energy involves too many different forms of energy. We can't really exactly calculate it. But let me answer the question according to what is being given over here. So I'm going to assume that you're going to be having, in terms of RT here now, we'll end up having in this case 3 moles. What we need over here is we need the CV value for oxygen and argon gas in this case. Oxygen gas is going to be diatomic. Alright, the CV value for this gas works out as the CV value for this gas works out as 5 by 2 R in this particular case for the diatomic molecule. Same way, if I take the CV value for argon over here, this guy is monoatomic. For this guy, the CV value works out as 3 by 2 R in this particular case here. So, when you're going to be interested in calculating here, we just have to dump it into the equation. Delta U, or rather internal energy in this case, works out as NR delta T, or in this particular case here, not NR, sorry, NCV delta T. So we'll have it as NCV dt, or in this case, I'm simply going to be taking it as NCV into T here. So I'm going to be taking it as NCVT for the particular case of the question here and solve it based on that. So if I'm going to be solving it based on that, this will basically work out as there is 3 moles of oxygen. So 3 into 5 by 2 R into T, plus I will end up having 5 moles of argon. So 5 into 3 by 2 R into T. So this works out as 15 by 2 RT plus 15 by 2 RT, which of course works out as 15 RT in this case. So if it works out as 15 RT, the answer here works out as option A in this particular question over here. So this is the basic way to proceed for this particular question. Let's get to the next one. An example of a solid sol is going to be, what does solid sol mean? Solid sol means you're going to be having dispersed phase being a solid, and dispersion medium is also going to be a solid. Alright, so when we are talking about solid in solid type of colloid over here, where do you get these examples from? This is available in surface chemistry chapter. Alright, this is available in surface chemistry chapter in your NCERT textbook. It is available in a tabular column in that particular part over there. Highly recommended to go through, because they have directly given you examples from that. If you knew it from that place, you can directly mark the answer and move on. No need to understand, no need to do any more etc. there. So it's a very straightforward question which you can directly mark and move on. It's a straightaway fact-based question which is applicable from this chapter. Anyway, let me explain. In this case, the answer is going to be gemstones actually. Let me show you, or let me explain how that works out. When you take any gemstone, alright, gemstones are mainly going to be made up of one type of a compound which is going to be the base, and the other compound or the other element or ion is going to be the dispersed phase in that particular case. Most often what is going to be happening is, let me take a typical example of a gemstone. Most gemstones are basically based on corundum. Corundum is going to be Al2O3. Alright, so pure Al2O3 basically is going to be considered as the purest form of sapphire. Alright, pure sapphire is actually going to be having no color. Alright, there will be no color. It is usually used in making extreme environment, glass. It's not really glass, but it is going to be completely transparent. For instance, the Apache helicopters which are made by the US military or made for the US military, which India recently acquired a few of. I think India has recently got like some 15-16 Apache helicopters. Those helicopters, their windshield is made up of pure sapphire. Alright, pure sapphire which is colorless obviously. At the same time, some very high-end gadgets like say the Apple iWatch which comes out, that screen is supposed to be made up of a sapphire coating over there. Sapphire is extremely hard and it has a Mohs scale hardness value of 8, which makes it a very good substance in terms of scratch proof, bulletproof, all those kind of properties. Now, let's get to it. This corundum is going to be usually the dispersion medium in this particular case. Whereas, you will have the dispersed phase generally is going to be metal ions. like chromium plus 3, manganese plus 2, iron plus 2, copper plus 2, etc. All of these guys are going to be part of the dispersed phase here, and each one will give a different color to the particular substance. Some of the commonly known gemstones which are going to be of this type are sapphire, the blue color version, emerald, which is going to be the green color version, ruby, which is going to be the red color version. All of these guys are going to be having a corundum base with some of these guys present as impurities over there, giving it a particular characteristic color. The metal ion gives the color, whereas the structure, the hardness, etc. comes from the corundum. Corundum is basically going to be hexagonal close packed structure. I'm not going to discuss that further here. Okay, so this is basically the example of a solid sol. Answer for this question is going to be gemstones. Next one, this is again a question from surface chemistry chapter involving Freundlich adsorption isotherm. Very rarely in a JEE mains paper will you see two questions from surface chemistry chapter. So this is a very rare, easy paper. So let's come back to this over here. What is a Freundlich adsorption isotherm? Freundlich adsorption isotherm is going to be this. We will end up having the equation as x by m is equal to Kp to the power of 1 by n. So this is going to be your Freundlich adsorption isotherm equation. So if I'm going to be look at the equation they are talking about drawing a graph of log of x by m versus log p. So let me take log over here. So if I take log over here, I'll be getting it as log of x by m is equal to log k plus 1 by n log of p. So log of x by m is equal to log k plus 1 by n log of p in this particular case here. So if you end up having something like this over here, this expression which we end up having over here is what they are giving you over here. Have a look now. This is going to be y is equal to c plus m into x. Alright, we are plotting versus log p here. So m is going to be your 1 by n and the log k is going to be your c in this particular case. So this is basically the situation over here. They are asking you to find out x by m at a pressure of 4 atm. So what should we find out over here? We need to calculate the value of k and we need to calculate the value of n. That is basically what is asked over here. It has a slope of 2. Slope is going to be 2 now, m value is 2. So if m value is equal to 2, that means I'm going to be having in this particular case here, 1 by n is going to be 2 over here. So this is a little bit of a tricky, weird case over here, but chalo, let's go about it and solve it as it is given over here. So log k is going to be given as c. So in this case, we have it as log of x by m is equal to log k plus m into log of p. So we are going to be having slope is given as this. Slope is given as 2 and we have intercept is given as 0.477. So this value is given as 0.477. 0.4771 is going to be log 3. That means the k value works out as 3 in this case. So k value is 3 and I'm going to be having in this case 1 by n is going to be given as 2, meaning n value works out as 1 by 2. So the n value works out as 1 by 2 in this particular case here. This is a little bit awkward mainly because usually the n value has to be something which is going to be more than 1. That is generally the norm which we use over here. So there is probably going to be some kind of an error in this question, but that is not my concern right now. I'm going to solve it according to what has been given in the question. So we're going to be having n is going to be given as 1 by 2 over here. As I mentioned just now, there is probably going to be an error here. Alright, but I am not interested in the error aspect over here. The error will probably be the fact that the n value is normally supposed to be something which is going to be more than 1. Here we are getting the n value as a half over here. There is probably going to be an error, but that's not my concern right now. Let's go ahead and proceed on according to the data given. So according to the data given, we end up having like this. So x by m is going to be equal to 3 into p whole to the power of 1 by n, which means it works out as 1 by n over here, n is going to be half over here. So 1 by 2 divided by 1. So 1 divided by 1 by 2 is going to be the situation over here. So x by m works out as p to the power of 2 into 3, meaning it works out as p value is going to be 4. So 4 squared into 3. So it works out as 16 into 3, which of course works out as 48. So most probably for the question given here, answer is 48 is fine. Alright. So for the data given in the question, answer is going to be 48 is going to be cool. But my expectation here is that we will end up having the slope here. This part, there is something wrong is what I feel. Because the n value should not be half. My guess is the data given which the student remembers is probably having some error in this case. And according to the error, we will end up having in this particular case here, most probably n value will work out as 2. If the n value works out as 2, we will end up having x by m is equal to 3 into p power half. It will work out as half over here. Because they have given it as 4. This is basically perfect square of 2. There has to be a reason why they have given it as a perfect square. Most probably in this case, the actual question will probably have an answer of 6. But according to the data given to us in the question, answer is 48. Alright, according to the data given to us in the current question, answer is going to be 48. But most probably there is an error at this part over here in terms of the student's memory over here. But that's okay. It gives you a reasonable idea as to what the question is going to be. And it looks like they are giving you good numbers which are going to be easy to solve over here either way. Alright, so this is basically this question. Let's get to the next one. Okay, which of the following graph is incorrect for an ideal gas? Alright, they are asking about incorrect for the ideal gas in this particular case over here. So ideal gas now, we are going to be having density over here plotted versus temperature. So let's have a look now. If I'm looking at the ideal gas equation written in terms of density, alright, if I write it in terms of density over here, the equation works out as Pm is equal to dRT, where m stands for molecular mass of the particular gas over there, d is density, t is temperature, p is pressure, r is gas constant. So if I write d versus t here, d will work out as to be equal to Pm by RT, meaning we can effectively write d to be equal to Pm by R into 1 by t. So simply put, we can say d is proportional to 1 by t, or we can say it's proportional to t power minus 1. This is basically the situation over here. That means this graph is perfectly correct. This graph is correct, this graph is wrong. They are asking which among the following is incorrect in this particular case. How do you draw this? This d versus t, d versus 1 by t graph is basically nothing but y versus 1 by x graph. That is y is equal to 1 by x graph. Y equal to 1 by x graph, now you all know the familiar graph over here, it looks like this. So the first graph and the second graph are correct, third graph is wrong in this case. So we'll end up having in this case incorrect is asked. So this is not the answer, this is your answer. So in this particular case, answer for this question is going to be option 3 in this scenario over here. Let's get to the next one. Okay, most reactive with HCN out of the following. What kind of a reaction is going to be looked at? We have aldehyde as the key part in all of the cases. Okay. Now let me quickly explain the aldehyde case over here. If I have an aldehyde reacting with HCN, what is going to be the reaction that happens here? Usually, along with HCN, I will have something else also. I will have KCN also usually taken. Because HCN does not dissociate properly, the reaction which happens in this case is going to be a nucleophilic addition reaction. Alright, so usually I will end up having a little bit of cyanide also available in the question. The student probably did not remember that part over there. There will be a little bit of KCN also given in these kind of questions usually. So what will be happening over there is cyanide will end up performing a nucleophilic attack on this location, wherein you have a nucleophilic addition reaction happening over here. This nucleophilic addition reaction mainly depends on two factors. The first factor it depends on is going to be the delta plus at the carbonyl location over here. Alright, it depends on the delta plus at the carbonyl carbon over there. That is going to be one aspect to pay attention to. The second aspect is, have a look here, this particular attack here is going to be happening on a carbon which is going to be flanked by an R group over here. So it definitely depends on the steric hindrance also. So there are two factors which you need to pay attention to here, the delta plus on the carbonyl carbon and the steric hindrance at that particular carbon here. Both factors are important to pay attention to, and we need to consider both factors here. Now, in case of, delta plus is going to be higher when there is going to be nitro in comparison to the OCH3. The nitro is going to be minus I and minus R over here, whereas the OCH3 is going to be minus I and a plus R. So we'll end up having in this particular case here, delta plus is going to be higher for the nitro over here. That means we can neglect this option. and this option straight away. So the correct answer has to be between one of these two here. This is definitely a slightly ambiguous question over here. Why do I say it is ambiguous? Because the nitro here in the ortho location, ortho mein when the nitro is present will have more minus I compared to the para, but it is having more minus I, but it also has more steric hindrance. This steric hindrance aspect is what I expect to play a bigger role over here. So my expectation is the answer has to be option 3 in this particular case here. But this is an ambiguous question. There is a possibility of the answer working out as option 1 also. Why? Mainly because it depends on whether the inductive effect is going to be winning or whether the steric hindrance wins. In this case, the expectation here is steric hindrance is going to be playing a slightly critical role. We will end up having both put together. Option 3 is going to be best in this particular case. Because the nitro and the para, the resonance is also going to be very good from the para location over here. So both delta plus and the steric hindrance aspect wise, option 3 is going to be the winner here. So when I consider both options together, option 3 works out as a winner in this case. So answer for this question works out as option 3. Next, among the following properties, which property is different from the others across a period? So when I'm going across a period, so they're asking us to consider the properties which are going to be mentioned here in a manner which is going to be across the period in this particular case. So when I look at across the period here, atomic radius ends up decreasing across the period. Electron gain enthalpy ends up increasing across the period. Electron negativity ends up increasing across the period, and lastly ionization enthalpy ends up increasing across the period as well. So among the 4 properties here, we are having 3 of the properties increasing across the period over here, whereas 1 property is going to be decreasing across the period over here. So answer is going to be obviously atomic radius in this case. They are asking you to find out the odd one out basically, and they are asking you to find which is different. They are basically asking you find the odd one out. Odd one out in this case is going to be our atomic radius, which is going to be decreasing across the period, whereas the other 3 are going to be increasing across the period over here. Next, find out the correct statement regarding this reaction. Okay, all right. So we have a fairly big reaction given to us. Let us start off over here. They are asking us A, B, and product C. Okay, all right. So they're asking us a bunch of questions over here involving these compounds here. Let us start off. So we're going to be having in this particular case here HBr excess. I'll be solving the entire thing over here. Please try to pay attention and catch as to what's happening here. So we have a double here and we have a carbon here. I'm going to be hitting it with HBr excess first. When I hit it with HBr excess, what is going to be happening here? Why have they given excess? The excess over here means it will attack over here and it will attack over here. So the HBr is definitely going to be destroying both this bond and the pi bond over here. So both of these bonds are going to be attacked by HBr here. So what is going to be happening is in this case, you will have H plus going over here and Br minus attacks over here. At the same time, H plus will also attack over here and Br minus will also attack at this location over here. Why does the Br minus attack at this location? Mainly because carbocation here is more stable. Why does the H plus attack over there? Because the oxygen benzene ring bond cannot be broken over here because oxygen will have resonance with the benzene ring. So let me explain here once more after I draw the product over here. So the product in this case will work out as OH, carbon with a bromine over here, carbon here with a hydrogen, and another carbon which is going to be attached to a carbon, we will have a bromine over here. This is basically the product obtained in this particular case over here. Why do I get this as the product? For instance, this oxygen carbon bond is going to be very difficult to break. So the hydrogen will go attack that particular oxygen and stay with it. And we'll end up having this bond breaking. Carbon becomes a carbocation, Br minus will go and attack over there. Here, this carbon is going to be a benzylic carbon. It results in a more stable carbocation. So the H plus will attack on this carbon, bromine will come over here. This is going to be my product A. Okay, which means we will end up having this as a correct option over here. So we're going to be having option A being correct. Let's go for the next one. So product A is going to be correct. KOH heating. What is going to be happening when I'm going to be doing KOH heating here? KOH heating now, this will basically give me E2 elimination in this case. So we'll end up having elimination happening here. So these two will get eliminated and we will end up having these two also getting eliminated in this case, resulting in the formation of We will have the OH over here, and we'll have a carbon, double bond carbon, single bond carbon, double bond carbon. This is going to be my compound B in this particular case over here. Now, next step, we are going to be performing ozonolysis here. This is basically going to be reductive ozonolysis. When we talk about reductive ozonolysis, how do we get the products over here? When you are performing reductive ozonolysis, it goes like this. Let us say I have a random compound like this. When you are performing reductive ozonolysis, break the C double bond C completely. At this location where you broke the bond, put a double bond O. At this location, put a double bond O. As simple as that. That's basically going to be your products over here. So if you have some other group here, R double dash, you'll get a ketone and an aldehyde. As simple as that. So you get an aldehyde on this side, a ketone on this side. So break all the C double bond C, replace them with C double bond O's. That is basically the answer for reductive ozonolysis. So in this case here, you have a benzene ring. Normal condition, please do not break the benzene ring. When you perform reductive ozonolysis under extreme conditions, the benzene's double bonds can also break. But under normal circumstances, try to avoid breaking the benzene ring over here. So we'll have this guy broken, this guy breaks off. So we'll end up having in this particular case here, OHCHO. We get CHO, plus we will also be getting a HCHO. So there is definitely some nonsense which is going to be a little bit tricky over here. This answer is wrong. Product A is this is wrong. Product Bombay is this is also wrong over here. Product C though is going to be a mixture of this. This seems like a possible correct answer here. But as I said, in this case, there is a possibility of breaking the benzene ring also. If I break the benzene ring, then in that case, this product is not going to be possible over here. What will happen if I break the benzene ring? I will end up having this guy also breaking into pieces here. If this guy breaks into pieces, I will end up having double bond O here, double bond O, double bond O, double bond O, double bond O, and a double bond O. So every carbon will get a double bond O. This will come out as one molecule. This entire part will come out as another molecule. And we will end up having this part getting out as another molecule. So we will end up having this product not being possible there, meaning this is going to be a possible wrong option here. So if you are given both of these options, if the student's memory is correct, if this option is also given and this option is also given, in that case, I would prefer to go for this as the better answer in this particular case over here. Alright, why? Because after ozonolysis, the benzene ring might also break in this particular case. Even though we are getting the answer as, okay, alright, it is not correct over here. They have given CH2OH. I did not notice this part over here. It has been given as CHO2H over here. I assume that it was only CHO over there. So yeah, this answer is anyway wrong over here. So either way, if they gave you this as the option there, you would still have to consider option A as the better answer. Why should you consider option A as the better answer? Mainly because in this particular case here, you are going to be having the benzene ring being unaffected. That is possible, yes, but that may also end up coming back as a wrong option over there. So please watch out for this case over here. In this case, best answer possible is going to be option A. As I said, there is going to be a probability of tiny error in the options in this particular case over here, but according to the given ones, answer A is going to be the best one. Let's get to the next one. Okay, we have glucose with HNO3 and acetic anhydride, glucose, acetic anhydride, glucose, nickel hydrogen, acetic anhydride. Calculate the required moles of acetic anhydride in XYZ. Acetic anhydride, what is it going to be doing? Acetic anhydride is used to measure number of OH groups present. Alright, it is mainly used to measure the number of OH groups present in a particular molecule. What do I mean by that over here? In this particular case, let's take a look at the structure of glucose here. Glucose has a structure like this. This is my structure of glucose in this particular case here. Obviously, there are hydrogens. Let me just mark them off as well. So this is my structure of glucose here. So when normal glucose reacts, in this particular case, what is going to be happening? We have one OH, one more OH, one more OH, one more OH, one more OH. So we'll have 5 moles of AC2O consumed in this process. What is going to be the product in that particular case? Every OH group, when you react it with acetic anhydride here, what happens is each OH group changes to become OC double bond OCH3. So the OH group becomes OCOCH3 and one molecule of CH3COOH gets kicked out in this process over here. So the OH group present in a molecule will become OCOCH3 and 1 molecule of CH3COH gets kicked out in the process. This is the reaction with AC2O in general. What is AC2O? AC2O is going to be nothing but acetic anhydride. Right, AC2O is going to be nothing but acetic anhydride as shown in this structure. So this part goes and combines off with this OH over here, and the hydrogen will go off for this guy, which becomes your CH3COH. Okay, now that means in the first case over here, or in the case of Y, we are going to be having 5 molecules of AC2O consumed over here. Let's look at the other cases. If I have hydrogen nickel, what will happen? This fellow will also be converted to an alcohol. The remainder will remain the same. The remaining part will be the same over here. So I have 5 OH over here, and I have 1 extra OH. Meaning in this case, I will be requiring 6 AC2O for this particular reaction to happen over here. And in the case of HNO3 here, nitric acid will oxidize the top and the bottom into carboxylic acid groups. So what will happen with nitric acid over here? Nitric acid के साथ I will end up having COOH, CHOH 4 times and COH. So the top and the bottom both end up being converted into carboxylic acid groups over here with nitric acid, because nitric acid is an oxidizing agent. So now you are having only 4 OH groups present over here. So when there are 4 OH groups present over here, you will end up having this guy basically has 4 OH groups. Implies we are going to be requiring 4 acetic anhydrides in this particular case here. So we will require X needing 4, Y needing 5 and Z needing 6. So answer here has to be X, Y, Z is what is asked. So answer has to be 4, 5, 6 in this particular question over here. Okay, it looks like that's the number of questions we have as of now. Don't worry about it. We have only 15 questions collected so far from the students as of now. We will be collecting the remaining questions also, and we'll be having a more complete in detail presentation of today's morning's, or rather September 2nd morning first session paper soon enough. So we'll be posting that also on the same website over here. Take care guys. Thank you very much and stay safe.